Hello, and welcome to Breath of Fresh Ed, a podcast with purpose focused on education topics for today, tomorrow, and always, with Kristen, Jen, and Lauren. Thanks for joining us on episode 5, Hire Character, Train Skill. As many school districts enter hiring season, we think heavily about the right person for the job. Time and time again, it has been proven that skills can be taught or transferred, but a person's character, specifically adults, cannot be changed. So is there a balance? Do we know what character traits are important to the role or to the district? And how do we measure that suitability? Join us as we reflect on our experiences and explore these vital questions.
So right off the bat, that just reminds me of my struggle with when you're interviewing someone, you're seeing, maybe one of the most nervous 60 minutes of their life and their best 60 minutes, right? Or 30, however long your interview is. And I always struggle with how can you see someone's character through an interview? And I reflect on the questions that we ask that are mainly focused on skill, right? Tell us a time when you failed and what happened and how did you overcome it? Mm-hmm. What are your assessment practices? I guess the failure one is kind of character, but people usually bring in what skill sets they bring to the table through those failures. So I don't know. This is a really interesting topic for me today.
Well, it also makes me think about you have the right people around the panel too, to even see it. So if I'm supposed to be working with someone and I'm not around the table or a colleague of mine isn't, how do we know that their character and their personality is going to mesh well with the team if they're not, I don't know, I guess if voices that are going to be working with the person closely aren't represented. And I also think about how we have, even I think we've started to try to see character, or at least actually, I think it's honestly more skill now that I'm talking out loud here, that we have them do mock lessons or mock, coaching experiences or whatever. And it's so contrived that you're seeing
skill.
Yeah, you really are. So even that, when we try it, I'm not sure that is their character.
No.
And a lot of that, you can even get from the application.
Yeah.
Or whatever they're submitting through that process. But part of the problem, I think, in a lot of cases is that districts or companies don't know or haven't identified their values, their priorities. So you don't know what types of those behavioral questions to ask applicants when they're coming in. And it's hard. Those are not Googleable questions.
No. Well, it's that qualitative versus quantitative type of question. I remember in my first interview for becoming a math teacher, they wanted to give me a math assessment to make sure I'd pass up through pre-algebra mathematics. They didn't know anything about me as a teacher, and anyone could have said Jen, yeah, she has a skill, but the character piece, how do you even norm that?
Well, it's kind of we all bring something different to the table, right? We're all different for a reason, and we are our own unique puzzle piece to the puzzle, and we all have an important part. But when you start to norm values and beliefs, then is that communicating that we all need to have the same values and beliefs? For the most part, we do have the same values and beliefs, right? Our core, who we are as core people and educators, we're very similar, but we also have differences. And that's okay, because I think that your differences, Jen and Lauren, kind of offset and balance my differences and vice versa. And so, I don't know, it just is, I don't know. And someone can just sit there and say I'm a reliable person and I am on time all the time and I'm respectful and whatever. But if they're saying those things, of course they're going to say those things. They're not going to say well, I'm typically late or whatever.
Right.
They're never going to paint a bad or negative picture. So I don't know. That's where I struggle. How do you really see who someone is in an interview?
And that reminds me, you don't hire people to maintain status quo in most cases. So I'm reliable. I'm on time. I do what I'm told, Is that making a difference?
Right.
That's most of the time what we're wanting to do.
For sure.
But what you're bringing up, Lauren, higher character trained skill, is a mind shift, because for so long we've interviewed people and been interviewed that based on questions that are focused on skill. Mm-hmm. So when you take that shift to character, to me, I'm kind of like, it's a risk, but then maybe you want those people who take the risk to kind of focus on who they are as people in an interview rather than the skills, if we truly believe that you can train skill.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so putting this out there for you guys. So have you guys had an interview question that did address character or skill, or a good one that you one that you want and felt like was helpful to kind of see character, or one that was not?
Yes. And something I'll never forget for the rest of my life, because I had a mini freak out for a second. But it was like one of my first interview questions ever. It was an exit interview for my my undergrad degree in middle childhood education. And I was asked, we learn a lot through this program, but what have the students taught you through your student teaching experience? And, it wasn't something I was prepared for. But it did, that mini freak out. I had to take a second to think. And those types of questions show that you're a vulnerable person, that you're, willing and able to grow. And that's something that every person we hire should be willing to do, is grow and get better and learn from others, even if they're students. So that's my hard, tough question that I thought was a great one.
Well, and that reminds me of like the power of vulnerability and how you open yourself up fully if you're vulnerable. Mm-hmm. But people, especially in an interview, when surrounded by strangers, like how willing are you really to be vulnerable?
Well, you're mostly vulnerable with people you trust, and you don't trust the people around you when they're, you're sitting at the head of a Thanksgiving table with 12 of not your closest friends,
Mm-hmm. Right. My very first interview coming out of college for the same school I student taught at, I was, big binder, portfolio in hand, my very first suit that I felt awkward in, with shoulder pads. I walked in and sat down, and I was like sweating bullets. I mean, sweating through definitely the shirt I was wearing underneath, and just super nervous. And the principal goes, "What is a book or article you have read recently that has changed your philosophy of teaching?" Oh. And I was like, well,
that's scary.
I'm probably not going to get this job. Yeah. Not because I'm not reading, but because I'm still kind of crafting my philosophy of education. You mean to tell me I've taught kids for 10 weeks and all of a sudden I need to have something set in stone, and then it has to change? Because it was changing all the time. Every time I was reading something, trying something new in the classroom. So I didn't get that job. I'm not sure if it was because of that question or my response. I mean, I did have something in my back pocket. It took me a minute, but I don't know. It to me did not. It wasn't the right question to get at why I was in education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mine is kind of similar to that one, Kristen. It was almost a gotcha question. The question was, how do you use Grant Stiggins in your current, work? And
oh, good Lord.
I mean, immediately, I was like, oh my gosh, I know the name. I have no idea, but I know what, and it was one of those things. And thank goodness there was a kind soul on the interview panel, who kind of, helped lead me. And then I was able to speak to it. But it was such a skill gotcha question that, oh my gosh, after that, I just remember I was so thirsty and nervous.
Which makes me think too, it goes back to the point, you're interviewing people just as much as they are interviewing you. Mm-hmm. Right? And are the questions an organization asks indicative of what they value and what they believe? Mm-hmm. And if not, it should, right?
Yeah.
Because those are telling.
It also makes me think like evaluation wise, and I know this is a little bit off topic, but like those 360 interview concepts where you get kind of insight from all main stakeholders that kind of work with you, how that would benefit. Maybe after year one, you get a 360 interview and it's kind of like how have you been as a, I don't know, as a teammate, as someone who's supposed to be courageous and collaborative and all of those things. And I don't know how even to weave that concept maybe into the interview process.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to the types of questions that are being asked, mainly based around skill, and not as much. I do think that professionals need to come in knowing something. I'm not saying that. And if 90% of the questions are around what you know and not who you are, and especially in education, it's such a people-driven business, we have to maybe rethink some things.
And even beyond the interview, look at the person's references, go beyond the references, go to their social media. I mean, you can tell a lot about a person.
There is the 5 roles of like a mature leader that we've talked about before, but it's from the Punk Rock of Business book, but it talks about the 5 different characteristics, like a warrior, someone who's swift to action, and a wizard, someone who's an expert in their field. So to Kristen's point a minute ago, like, yeah, you do need to be knowledgeable and have the skills, but a creator, are they innovative? A simplifier, so do they take like the complex and kind of make it easier and more manageable? And then the 5th one is a muse, so someone who inspires trust and collaboration. But this guy in the book says he uses those characteristics. And if someone doesn't check off 4 of the 5 boxes in the interview, then it's a no for him. And so that to me gets a little bit more to the character with one skill kind of question woven in.
So it makes me think, like, looking at these characteristics, and I'm looking at them right now as we're talking. And for those of you who don't know, Jeremy Dale is the author of The Punk Rock of Business, who writes about these 5 characteristics. It makes me think, like, perhaps looking at these, profiles and carving questions around the profiles, and actually thinking, who do you have around the table first? And then which characteristic are you kind of most looking to fulfill? Or profile, I should say, not characteristic.
Yeah. And I think about, we don't know what we're going to need 10 years, 15 years from now, but we know the kinds of people that we want working for us and that we want working with. So Jen, I think that those are, great characteristics to look for. That's someone who knows what they're looking for and knows exactly what type of person they want on their team.
So as we wrap up the school year and begin to think about planning for next year, we encourage you to reflect on the character values that are important to your team and working environment. How will you know, and what questions might you ask? Share your ideas with us on breathofFreshEd.com or use the hashtag BreathOfFreshEd.